You're listening to Finding My Own Weird, where we'll follow yours truly on a journey to discover my own authentic weird self. I'm your host, Christine Lassiter. Joining me will be amazing guests who found their own formula and are living and thriving as their own wonderfully weird selves. So hold on tight, it's about to get weird. Many years ago, when I was an activity director for a nursing home, my primary job was to find appropriate activities to engage and entertain the residents. And I was a very good activity director. Every year, we would have the Senior Olympics. In Tyler, Texas, where the event was held, was a huge senior community. So this was a very big event. This particular year, we held the event at our local concert venue. There were nursing homes from all areas in the surrounding Tyler, Texas area. Dozens of communities, so many residents, staff, and families from each. The activity directors were the cheerleaders of the event. We were there to keep the energy high. Now, just prior to this, I had been in the play Grease, where I hand-jived, danced, and did a cartwheel into the splits. This is all very relevant information. I did all of these things successfully. When it came time for the activity directors to make their way to the center of the venue to vie for the spirit stick, I was all in. As I was running full speed to center stage, surrounded by all these wonderful seniors, their staff, their families, all cheering. Well, about mid-cartwheel, it occurred to me that I'd only ever done this from a standstill position, never in a dead run. The momentum was too much, but it was too late. I was going over at a very high rate of speed. Then, blam, right on my ass. The entire venue went silent. No one moved. No one spoke. It was surreal. Then my adrenaline kicked in and I hopped up and I kept going like it never happened. Well, the next day, I was having x-rays on my hip. In a room of 70, 80, 90, and 100-year-old, I was the only one getting checked for a broken hip. For more than a decade, I would have people coming up to me saying, "Hey, weren't you that gal who did that cartwheel at Senior Olympics?" Well, anything to leave my mark, literally and figuratively. Speaking of leaving a mark, our next guest, from a very young age, was creating something out of nothing, from dish towels as headscarves to sharing shoes with friends and creative writing. She took solace in the things of beauty and art and used them as an escape for a very hard time. Now she's using those escapes and passions to help others. Today, we're interviewing Maggie Greene. Hi, Maggie. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
So I actually put out there in the universe that I was looking for some weird folks, and you answered that call, and I gotta love some self-aware weirds. So you've created kind of this unique business for yourself, which we will definitely talk about. But weird people don't start out as knowing they're weird or being the ultimate weird that they are now. So we're going to start at the beginning of your journey and where you come from and ways that you knew that you were different.
It's a long story.
Mhm.
We'll start, let's start at the beginning. I grew up in a very small rural community in central Kentucky. So I'm originally from the South.
Right?
My family is half Southern Baptist fundamentalist and half Mormon.
Oh, yeah.
Those were certainly influences in like as I'm trying to figure out who I am and my relationship to the world.
Right?
Um, I grew up a child of addicts, not only in substance use and abuse, but alcoholism primarily, um, paired with mental health challenges on both sides and genetic complications. And um, so my parents, my father is now deceased. Which just as a side note, like when he died, I remember reading his obituary in the newspaper and it was really interesting. It was as if I was seeing a stranger's obituary.
Mm.
So like it took my whole life for him to actually die, but he was mostly dead to me the whole time. So he was
Right.
absent, right? They divorced fairly early on. I have one sibling. We're 18 months apart, very close. Irish twins, almost Irish twins, I guess, as they say. And we both are survivors of abuse and trauma. Of course, with alcoholism and addiction and mental health challenges, it was sort of the perfect shitstorm for
Right.
a toxic environment. And it's interesting being an adult and reflecting on this now because at the time, it was all I knew, right? Now, of course, I know it was pretty weird and pretty different. The way that I grew up, we were extremely poor. So definitely experienced financial insecurity, housing insecurity, food insecurity. There was also a point at which my mother, so my primary caregiver, I guess she would have been in her mid to late 20s at this point, decided that she had hit a threshold. Like she was unable to carry out the responsibility of parenthood. And so we went to live with one of her siblings that I today refer to as my primary abuser. It was like the most formative years of my life between the ages of 7 and 12, right
Okay.
up to puberty. And during all of those years, of course, I'm part stylist now. I know we'll talk about that later, but like from the womb, as soon as I came out, there was a gift. Something like, I mean, I describe it as an obsession. It's like my first thought was about shoes, or
Right.
accessories or clothing. And it's funny, like most of the stories that I have about my earliest childhood experiences and things that I did and enjoyed are secondhand. So they're told to me by family members. I don't know if it's like repression or what, right? Like our memories don't really fully form in a lasting way until we're about age 4 or 5. So
Right.
from like age 3, I was doing things like, keep in mind, I told you we were broke. We didn't have
Right.
any
Right.
resources. But from the moment that I was born, I was somehow able to maximize whatever we had, make something special out of nothing. And it started with dish towels and like the really soft cotton flannel receiving blankets that they give new parents in the labor and delivery room. I
Mhm.
would take those items and wrap them around my head in these really elaborate ways and create these like complex knots in the front, like a headdress. And I just
Right.
thought I was the shit, like the coolest thing. Um, there were other like quirky moments where, just me being my creative, sassy self and exploring style and personal expression. I I know that, like, around age 5, age 7, things started getting really complicated at home, and I began internalizing a lot of the models that I saw around me, but also the messaging that I heard not only in our, like, immediate family, but, like, extended family, and obviously I was in school at that point, so, like, influence of peers and things. I was not your average kid.
Right.
I was placed into the gifted and talented program. Um, I found myself like when I think back to like elementary school, I remember being bored a lot,
Right.
and that got me in trouble because I would finish my work and I would help my friends finish their work, and then so the work was done and we've still got this classroom time left. So I'm gonna chit chat and I'm gonna learn to French braid and I'm gonna teach my classmates how to do cool things with their hair. And we're gonna talk about, like Barbies and all kinds of things.
Right.
But it's interesting. I'm like, as I'm hearing myself talk, I'm mentioning like kind of feminine elements those moments, like early childhood, my vibe was absolutely flannel shirts and denim overalls.
Very
And I had,
tomboy.
yeah, I was like freckly, awkward kid. I had like short hair, kind of a bowl cut, definitely DIY. I had home haircuts for my entire life until I think I think my first professional one that I remember was like age 13 or something like that.
Did you feel
Um,
fancy?
yeah, it was luxury compared to what I had grown up with, like this is a thing. And obviously the process too of like just feeling so indulgent because it's not just the haircut, it's like
Right.
the scalp massage and the wash and the whole thing. And um, in my home life, the things about me that were special or different were kind of used against me as weapons. They were weaponized. I was humiliated and criticized a lot at home. And I think about my relationship to school. I was always an eager and curious learner. And I was also desperate for connection. And of course, I wanted to be liked and respected and popular and have friends and all those things. School was like my safe haven um, for as long as I can remember, even through high school. And I had really close relationships with my teachers. They were really powerful advocates for me. But it was interesting because those interactions were limited only to the school environment.
Right.
Part of the, frankly, I guess, like emotional neglect that I experienced was um, not giving me permission or access to things like extracurricular activities. If it
Mhm.
was going to cost a uniform or an instrument or gas to get back and forth to whatever venue or like, so sports, clubs, any of those things were like, no matter how badly I wanted them. And I think that was part of it because I did want it so badly. I wasn't allowed to have it. So when I wasn't in school, how do I find my weird? How do I express that in a way that's safe? Because it wasn't safe at home. So I turned to writing. I've been writing since I was probably 6 years old. And it's always been, various formats. I've tried poetry and prose and all of it. And the gifted talented program at school, the instructor for that program was really encouraging to me. And I remember writing an essay about a Cranberry song in the early 90s and feeling like just the opportunity to even go there at school, Like, I mean, I was still am a huge Dolores O'Riordan and Cranberries fan, but it was also like a sign of the time too.
Right.
And the fact that we could talk about music in like a deep and powerful, creative way and there was no shame or judgment. It was just like freedom to explore was really special to me. So
Do
as far as far
you
as
still
weird,
have that story?
I don't know if I have that specific one. What I do have though are there are I think 3 or 4 um very low budget publications from those years. So this would have been like 95, 96, 97, 98 around there where we as a class, the gifted program, produced all kinds of content and materials,
Okay.
including illustrations. And then the instructor partnered with the school to make physical copies. And I actually designed the cover of several of those publications. I'm I hesitate to call them publications because it's very like rudimentary. This was like dot
Are they
dot
bound
next printer.
together? Are they bound
They
together?
are. They
Okay.
are, yeah.
Then that is legit.
Yeah,
You can absolutely call them publications. You can,
yeah.
you know, there were more than one of them made.
Oh, yeah, multi-volume collection, yeah.
I think that makes it very legit.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think I always knew I was a little bit weird. Certainly, like, the lack of resources, was a bit of a social barrier. So, like,
Mhm.
even though I was smart and funny and I liked to talk and help people and things like that, it was also clear that, like, I'm not the person that you invite to a slumber party or, like, to participate in, again, like, those extracurricular activities because when I'm not at school, I'm in this other place, and we didn't I wasn't allowed to have friends over, like, even things like snacks. As I grew up, the concept of snacks just blew my mind. Like, we had regular meals, and it was fairly regimented. Most of the time, they were home-cooked meals, but I didn't have access to snacks. Like, if I was digging in the cabinet for something to eat after school, like, that just would not have happened. I would have gotten punished for that.
Right.
So these really formative years leading up to puberty, I'm starting to figure out that there's some crazy stuff going on with my body, right? So I'm going from like flannel shirts and denim overalls to I woke up with like C cups overnight, and how do I accommodate this and what does this mean? And um unfortunately, because the environment that I was in, it also wasn't a safe place to talk about those things. And as my
Right.
body changed, I received feedback from my immediate family. None of it was positive. I'm sorry to say that that's the truth. And so when I talk about internalization of those things, right, I grew to hate my body. I grew to like I learned because I was taught to make the things that were special about me secret or small or quiet or like, just like rein it in. Maggie is too much. She's gone off the deep end, right? Like
Right.
there she is. Like, I don't know how long she's been in front of that bathroom mirror like styling those bangs. They called it primping. Are
Right.
you in
Oh,
there
yeah.
primping again?
Mhm. I did
And I
bachelor
think about
prepping. Yep.
right? I heard this phrase so much growing up, and it plays in my mind to this day because if Maggie then knew Maggie now,
Right.
I mean, it would blow her mind. But I heard it's school. It's not a fucking fashion show. No,
I don't know where you
I
went to
know.
school. It was a fucking fashion show.
Yes, and like, do you know who you're talking to? This is
Right.
like I'm coming out of the womb obsessing over shoes, and this is my moment, right?
Right.
Like the first day outfit. And it was like one of the few things in my life that I had to look forward to. It was a creative outlet, and it was something that I felt uniquely connected to. So to be told, like, why can't school be a fashion show? Right? I'm getting good grades. Like, I am, they're thinking about advancing me 1 or 2 grades ahead of my current class, like, "Let me have this," It's kind of
Right.
my feeling now, why couldn't I have that? Um, but yeah, it was a fashion show, and I remember, I don't think I've ever told this story before, but those who grew up with me in Podunk, Kentucky, and went to elementary school with me will remember there were a few peers of mine, girlfriends that like we had the same shoe size, which at the time I guess was fairly common. Now it's so hard to find someone I can share shoes with, but
Right.
like it was a really big deal to me that these girls were receptive to the idea. Like I came up with this, I don't know, elaborate, like persuasive kind of approach. Like if we could just swap shoes for the day or even just like the next 2 classes. So I had an opportunity to like feel what it was like to explore that and like
Right.
have fun with that. Um, and I don't know, I think about it now like, do people borrow each other's shoes? Like, were other people doing that? Or, like, um, yeah, I wanted to feel connected to the people, but I really wanted cool shoes and I didn't have them, you know? Um,
It's funny you mentioned that, and I think about, so I'm a little bit older than you, maybe a little bit more than a little bit older than you, but, so when I was in, like, junior high or something, the fashion styles were, jams. Now jams are long, wild color, like, surfer skater shorts. And they were just
mhm.
like the wildest colors, and everybody and I for some reason, I don't know why, but I was obsessed with skaters. I could not I could not skateboard, but I loved skaters, and not just like, "Ooh, the skater boys are hot," but just, like, loved the whole concept. I thought it was super cool. I used to draw skaters upside down with their little hand down and their feet up. Um, but I wanted a pair of Jams so bad. And again, I grew up with, like you did, dirt poor. We did not put we didn't put pants on with names on them. I mean, we just didn't. We couldn't. I didn't have the pretty white kids that all the girls had. I didn't have Guess jeans. And I didn't care about those as much, but I really wanted Jams. And my mother, bless her heart, loved my mom so much. She went and found the ugliest material she could, and she made me a pair of Jams. They were awful. They were so bad. I mean, they were very homemade. And I love that my mom, I can look at it now and go, my mom was trying so hard to help me fit in, just to want this one thing, because this one thing that would have made all the difference when it definitely wouldn't, because the fashion changes so quickly. They're on to something else before I can even blink, and we wouldn't be able to afford the next thing either. But yeah, that concept of if I had this one thing, well, then they're gonna look at me differently. They're gonna see I'm cool like they are. So I can relate to all that you're saying there because for me it was jams, and I got the ugly knockoff homemade jams.
Homemade.
Thank you, Mom, for doing that, because that is so cool that she did that, and that she tried so hard, and I tried to be appreciative, but I was embarrassed, as you are by everything when you're 13 or 14 years old, but I relate to what you're saying, that maybe that pair of shoes, for 2 periods in a day makes all the difference.
You mentioned skater culture, and I was like, my eyes lit up because I totally feel that. Like, I think it must have been heading into middle school, so like the 5th to 6th grade kind of moment. It was wide leg jeans and skater shoes, but it wasn't just any skater shoe. It had to be Airwalks,
Right,
and like, all of my best friends had them, and, like, the most popular kids in school had custom ones that were, like, school colors with glitter, and I knew that that could never be me, or at
right,
least I thought that, but I did have a family member, it was my dad's sister, who I still have a great relationship with to this day. She was kind of this bright spot in all of it, even though she was, like, on the fringe and we didn't see each other very often. Um, she tried really hard to keep me in, like, the current styles, and, um, it's funny when I think about it because that I have really strong feelings about clothing as gifts. This is probably not the conversation to get too deep into that, but all that to say, like, she's literally the only person in my life who has ever gotten it right with any consistency. Like, she
right,
actually listened to my preferences and cared and took that feedback, and the things that she suggested or brought into my life were like, it felt me. Whereas the things that I had access to on a regular basis they were hand me downs and afterthoughts and you know, I for that period between ages 7 and 12, like, it's just so vivid in my mind and so important, like, integral to my development. I worked on tobacco farms every single summer, and I was like too physically small to participate in like most of the big time labor. So my job was to follow the tobacco setter every summer. And this was Kentucky, so super hot, very high humidity. I'm in like threadbare tank and shorts and like Bobo sneakers or whatever, following the tractor for miles. It felt like miles and miles and hours. We'd be out there from sunup till sundown, and we'd get paid at the end of the summer, right? It wasn't free labor. So this is interesting, right? Like,
Yeah.
they actually paid us, but I remember getting checks at the end of the summer. So like 3 months of labor.
So they
Got a
didn't
check
pay you
for
on a
like
re they paid you one for the whole summer?
one time, and it was like $50, $100. I
But that
I
had to
really
feel like
don't
a
think
ton of money at the time.
at the time I was like, yes, finally it's payday. And of course I'd already made my list. Like, when I'm after shoes on the top
Right?
of that list, right? Clothing and accessories. And if I have anything left over, it's going to, at that time, it was cassette tapes, but
Right.
eventually it was CDs and right. Um, but yeah, like I remember distinctly like going to Kmart and like my mission was to pick out an outfit head to toe. I wanted a top and pants and shoes and yeah, I mean they weren't the airwalks and the wide leg jeans. That was kind of before that time, but
Right.
it was a really big deal to make my own decision. The fact that my abusive family members even facilitated that. There was some back and forth, right?
Right.
There were things that I wanted, and they're like, "No," but I did largely make those choices, and I made the investment financially, and I reaped the rewards. I mean, I wore that. It was, I think they were. I didn't get new jeans, but I had jeans that were already like blown out at the knees, which is very like Seattle grunge, even though I
Yeah.
didn't know it at the time. And this cream colored crop top t-shirt with like this giant sunflower on it. And I had a plaid flannel shirt that I wore over it with like knockoff brand Converse All Stars. And again, like it was the closest thing that I could remember feeling like in that time period to the moment when I had, like, the dish towel on my head, like
Right.
a headdress. I'm like, "Yeah, I'm rocking. I'm, like, my own style icon." And the more my body developed, the more I started, like, leaning into and finding joy in these things that people around me just, like, try to put that fire out for years and years.
And now, a word from our sponsor, me. What does having a background in senior healthcare have to do with being a mortgage broker? More than you think. When I was in senior healthcare, it was my job to sit down with families and discuss personal, private information, discuss options, look for solutions, and help the senior and their loved ones through the transition. I spent years and years doing that. Today, I kind of do the same thing. Buying a home can be intimidating, scary. You have to feel comfortable disclosing very personal details, especially about income and debt. And you have to feel a sense of trust. Even though the business itself is transactional, the relationship with me is not. I feel that it's very important to build that trust and comfort with my clients. It means that I might be looking at their situation on the weekend or evenings, that I'll be doing problem solving with them, and that I'll be holding their hand throughout the whole process. At the end of the day, this should be a very relational experience. I'm so happy to help you walk through it. To talk to me about a mortgage in Oregon or Washington, contact me at Christine at tworiversmtg.com. That's CHRISTINE at TWORIVERSMTG.com, or call me at 903-343-1370 in MLS 224-8608. And now back to your program.
Eventually I moved back in with my mom. She did some internal work and therapy and got sober and said, all right, we're going to try this again. There's like 3 husbands over this period of time. So, different influences, different flavors of abuse and trauma all the while. Um, so yeah, that was hard. Like being the kid that, I mean, people wanted to hang out with me after school and they wanted me to participate. There were a lot of opportunities like drama club. I remember doing an audition. I think this would have been 4th or 5th grade, and I made it, but I knew even when I went for the audition that I wasn't gonna be able to participate, so it's
Mhm.
like, the experience was limited, and,
Yeah.
um, that was hard, but, yeah, I mean, getting older into, like, high school age, I still found myself bored at school, so I'm getting in trouble in, like, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th grade for talking and interrupting class, and I get a little bit older, and I start skipping class and experimenting with substance use and, um, like, enjoying social distractions, just really experimenting, trying to figure out, like, who am I? Where do I belong? In those years, I mentioned emotional neglect prior to that. Even though I had an active relationship with my mom and we lived together, like where the hell was she? I
Right.
don't know, right? So I was kind of, I was independent, like a little bit of a loner kid, and I was just hungry for anything that could make me feel something, you know. Um, I liked a lot of music that my peers didn't like. Like, I remember listening to, like, Marilyn Manson, for example, in elementary school, and people were like, "What in the," and but also, like,
Yeah,
Green Day and
that's not playground kind of music.
no, Arrested Development, right? Like, I mean, had this whole world that existed only inside of my head, and the only time I could really explore it authentically was in writing, and things got really weird in my writing, you know, um, still kind of weird maybe to this day, but I I will say that that outlet probably saved my life more than once, knowing that I had a place to go again where I could explore those things, explore myself, discover things safely and without judgment and criticism and shame. Um, yeah, I mean, I turned to pen and paper in the worst moments of my life, and I still do that. It's healing. It's how I process grief. It's how I, like manage my emotional baseline. Because otherwise, that shit is a roller coaster at all
Right.
times. Um,
When you were growing up in
yeah,
school, what did you wanna be when you grew up?
my first fantasy along those lines actually came to me in a dream. I had this vision, and of course, the outfit is still just as vivid to this day. I was like on top of the swing set, not on the swing, not on a platform. I was on top of the world, and I had a microphone in my hand,
Right.
and I was singing. Like, I wanted to be a rock star. I wanted to be what else did I wanna be? I mean, there were all kinds of things that I thought about, but, like, that was and there was this turquoise silk button-up shirt. It was, like, boxy style and these tapered light wash jeans and these flats that they were, like, cherry red that really made the turquoise pop, and I had all the volume in my hair, like,
Yeah.
imagine maybe Tiffany or Cyndi Lauper
Oh,
or
no,
something. It was like
I'm an
that,
'80s girl. Yeah,
Right.
I can relate. Yeah, my hair was I mean, it was big. It was big hair. So, yeah, I understand.
Um, I I mean, other than that, other than those, like, fleeting fantasies of, like, possibility, it was so much about survival in the day to
Mm,
day that there were moments, even as a teenager, where it just wasn't possible to think that far ahead. It's like, am I gonna get through this moment? There wasn't space for planning my future, like even high school with college, of course that's, I want to go to school. I want more school. I want to learn more. I want
Right.
to meet more people. Like, how the hell is that even possible? There just wasn't any way financially. And I discovered Berea College, which the way they're set up, they have like the second largest endowment in the nation next to Harvard or something. It's like
Mm.
all grant funded, private foundation monies that make it possible to award any student who gets accepted. They cater to low income as well as international students. But they anyone who gets accepted is awarded a full tuition scholarship.
Wow.
So that was like my only chance in my mind at
Yeah.
college, right? And in those days, like I really started thinking about at the time I was referring to it as fashion in my mind. If you ask me today, do I work in fashion? My answer is no. Maybe we can get into that a little bit, but
Mhm.
I the job that I imagined was like my dream job when I was about 14 or 15 was being a copywriter for J. Peterman magazine.
Okay.
Uh, Listeners, I don't know if you're familiar with this publication. They are still around, but and that this is kind of definitely comes out in my work today, but it was never about just the clothes for me. Even the airwalks and the wide leg jeans, it was not the shoes specifically or the pants. It was opportunity and possibility and connection and belonging and all of those things. So J. Peterman, of course, there are illustrations of garments, and their job as an entity is to sell these clothes. But it was always the story,
Just do it.
you know. This is not just any peacoat, right? It is its own character and it has its own history. And there's also a future with this peacoat. Like, and the missing piece is you, right?
That's
Like,
very
whatever that
Elaine
is.
from Seinfeld.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Yes. So I really thought that that was like the dream. So anything that could help me marry my love and skills of writing and communication and language with that creative expression piece. At the time, I was like, it's got to be clothes. But as soon as I had those thoughts, again, keeping in mind the context of what I've learned up to this point about life and my self worth, it never even crossed my mind that that could be a possibility. Like, you know, I was so like caught up in scarcity mindset, because that's all I knew. It was like, I just got to do whatever is going to pay the bills, right? I got to make sure that I'm going to be able to eat. So, I mean, I worked in food service, right? As a teenager, that
Right.
was my
Right.
first gig. Of course, I blew every paycheck after I shared some of it with my mom for our household expenses. Everything went to clothing, shoes, and accessories, whatever was left.
Right.
Um, yeah, like I flirted with the idea of like being a veterinarian, and I thought about being a storm chaser for a minute. I think that was the year that Twister came out. I
Twitter.
was like, oh yeah,
Mhm.
I was always really fascinated by science. The older I got, of course, like going into college, I started really getting interested in things like psychology and sociology and psychopathy, which, gosh, that was illuminating. I'm like, okay, this explains so much of my experience and my family dynamic. And this trauma is generational and, all of those things, which was really powerful. I'm trying to think like in college, like, what was I thinking about my career? I really had no idea. Like, I just
Right.
want to write. I want to wear what I want. I want to write. I want to always be learning, but also leave an impact. I want to make a difference, right? Um, so my my first job out of college, was this was the 2008 recession.
Mm.
Nobody wanted to hire somebody fresh out of school.
Right,
I I had a lot of social connections, but most of the folks that I was associated with were not really thinking about the future. They were thinking about right now and like dopamine and serotonin and what's going to give us our fix in this very moment, like,
right.
those cheap thrills or whatever. Uh, so, yeah, I didn't know what I was going to do. But the first thing I did do was work on an organic vegetable farm,
Oh, you went
which
from tobacco to vegetable? Well, that track.
And I
Yep.
I thought about that too, like, because I had kind of grown to resent that background, right? It
Right.
wasn't just Kentucky, but the farming and being poor and, like, that whole piece. And then after graduating college, I was like, "Well, maybe I can find some way to, like, reunite with something positive about that." And I did find digging in the dirt extremely therapeutic. And there was, like, the physical labor of it all, which was an interesting challenge for me. I've never been an athlete by any means. But as I'm doing this labor, it's kind of meditative because I also have the space and the freedom to, like, go to all those cool places that I had created in my head,
The daydreaming.
daydreaming. I'll never forget though my interview. So as I was interviewing as an apprentice for this farm. It was like I didn't know if I was going to get the gig or not. Uh, and I remember I normally have really, really long natural fingernails, and they were super long. And I had like these really cute peep toe shoes on or something like that. And the farmer, the owner of the property was like, he gave me this side eye, like, we're gonna be dealing with very like things like cherry tomatoes. Like you could poke your eye out, but also like you could ruin the produce. So like if we're gonna do this, we need to you need to make sure to cut your nails down. And it
Right.
was interesting because, you know, even to this day, like before I launched my business and job interviews, my first and only question normally was like, what's the dress code? Um, but for this farm, right? I was gonna be there all summer, and to make that work, I had to hang up literally and figuratively all of my favorite pieces. It was not about style. There wasn't any place for that. It was like function only. And I learned a lot. I kind of reconnected with my body and sort of worked through some of the residual um, resentment and just like poor self concept while I'm digging in the dirt and sweating my ass off and weeding strawberries and using a fucking machete to like harvest cilantro, you know? It was a brief employment opportunity, but I feel like it was really um powerful and influential in kind of everything that happened next.
Yeah, cathartic.
Cathartic, yes. It was therapy in the field. Yes, definitely.
So what did you do after
Um
that?
My next job, my first, like, real job, I guess, when I had a regular paycheck, I was an intern at a daily newspaper.
Okay.
So, that was cool because I got to explore
That's
my
like a
level.
step into that writing. That's like you're that
Right,
close.
and I was like, "This is it. I am launching my professional writing career. This is step 1, and I am headed there." Um And, like, when I think about that experience, I remember, like, specific fellow staff members stopping me and being like, "Where do you get your clothes?" Like, I have never seen anything like this. And I remember the 2 people who interviewed me, it was, like, the assistant editor and her assistant. Um, they're, like, after the interview and they had hired me, and I'm like, "I will never forget what you wore, like, it was just, like, so cool and interesting." Okay, like, it's just me, right? That's who I
Right.
am.
Yeah.
But one of the same people who interviewed me was about 9 months into the gig, had a conversation, big sit down with me, and said that they thought maybe I should consider pursuing something other than writing professionally. It's like,
Oh, that's rough.
it was hard. And, I think about that now and I'm like, news writing isn't writing. It's different from magazine writing. It's different from novel writing, poetry
Right.
writing. I mean, the
That's the fact,
training
ma'am.
process, we're like, okay, fifth grade to eighth grade reading level audience here. We're like, it's got to be really plain and stick to the facts only. And like, there's no um, subtext or, you know, really even any story there. It's just
Right.
like, we're reporting, um, regurgitating, like, whatever the facts. So, but at the time, I was completely devastated
Oh, yeah.
because up to that point, right, I was like, this is my dream. This is what I wanted to do. And I thought this was my first, my foray into it, which is funny. It wasn't long after that that I started freelancing professionally as like a side gig. There was a monthly magazine. It's called Kentucky Monthly Magazine. I put a portfolio together and reached out. They're like, "Yeah, we want you, we can't pay much, but you can
Right.
do an article at a time." And I did that for a little while. Like I said, kind of as a side hustle. I ended up working at a wine bar briefly, which I will never forget. Like, there was another food service job that I was applying to right about that same time. And one of the questions was name 4 white grapes and 4 red grapes, like, wine varietals. And I couldn't. I was so stumped. Like, I had no.
I'm I'll be 49 in about 3 weeks. I can't. I mean, is there, that is white grape, red grape. That is, isn't that the varieties?
Yeah, exactly. Like, that might have been my basic understanding at that point. I had no wine knowledge. And I waltzed into the wine bar. And I'm like, I mean, I love cheese as much as I love writing, so maybe this could be cool. You know? Maybe at some point I'll prove myself, after the hard manual labor and they'll let me into their marketing
Right.
side of things or whatever. I'm like, anything. And I'll never forget that the extent of my training basically for that job was the owner of the establishment gave me a copy of Wine for Dummies. And I ate it up. I mean, I inhaled that shit and I was so ready. I was like, I couldn't learn another thing about wine. I know all there is, which wasn't true. There's still always more to learn, but I had a lot of fun with that because it was like a different language, and it was
Right.
this really cool, kind of weird social club that finally I had access to. And, like only people who appreciate wine can share this language and these stories. And so that was fun, but still like not in a direction that felt like me. It was
Right.
just one of those, I gotta pay rent, you know. Um After that it was state government, which in that the climate, like the time period, but also the region, that's just what you do. That is your ticket to stability and security and health insurance. And like, um, just like with school, I was like, I got tapped out so fast. So I'm like, okay, what's next? And there wasn't anywhere else to go. Like I'd been promoted and I'd been given more responsibility and I'd been headhunted by another agency. And like, I got to the Capitol building, which granted, it was still an administrative position, but like, I'm working with legislators. I am sharing space with like all the movers and shakers in, again, Podunk, Kentucky state
Right.
government. And I'm like, I'm going crazy from boredom. I felt so underutilized. I'm like, you all don't even know what is in here, what I'm capable of, but of course I got compliments on my outfits every day. Like, that was just like part of being me too. And I was always gracious about it, and of course, it made me feel good and made me feel
Sure.
validated, but inside, I was like, "How can I turn that and my brain into something that's, like, really gonna fill me up, but also pay my bills? Like, is that
Yeah.
even possible?" Um, the state government was the last thing that I did before I decided to take the biggest risk of my entire life and move to Washington State, Seattle specifically. Like, as a
Quite the leap.
teenager, big, big leap. There were a few reasons for it. There was, like, if you're looking at the map, like, it's the furthest geographical distance. It's like, I need
That's
some
like
space.
Texas to Portland. Yep.
Exactly. I need some space between me and my past, but also, like, of course, by this point, I was very familiar with the grunge movement, and
Right.
Seattle in my mind was like this mecca of creativity and innovation and culture and like all the things that Kentucky was not. A faster pace. That's what I wanted. It was like, can we move this along? Um, law and government, if you know, you know, that shit is like molasses, you know?
Yeah.
Um, so I say it was the biggest risk of my life because I didn't have a plan. Like up to that point, I didn't I didn't go to another job until I had or rather I didn't leave one job until I had another one lined up.
Right.
It was like
The
stability and
rule. Yeah.
security was so important. And I was like, this is the time. I think I was 26, 27. If I don't do it now, I'm never going to do it.
Right.
And maybe Seattle's not the ultimate destination, but I know that this is not home, right?
Hmm.
I got to get out of here. Figure out like, I had an idea of who I was and what I wanted to do, but there just I there were a lot of unanswered questions, and I thought this move would help me answer them, and it did. I
Mm.
mean, it yeah, no
Had
no
you ever
turning back.
visited before?
No, no. Um, I did a lot of traveling as a kid, actually, and against my will,
Yeah.
we went to all kinds of places for my mom to meet men, and, like, we went to Canada and England, like, just all kinds of weird things. Never had been to Seattle, had never been west of the Mississippi River in my entire life. So imagine, right? Like, I mean, this is it. I'm banking it all. I cashed out my 401k for my 5 years in state government and had just enough of a nest egg that I thought, well, I can make it. I can rent the moving truck, right? I can make it there. Of course, I looked at apartments and was job hunting before I left, but like
Yeah.
nothing was in stone. I was on the road building that thing while I'm flying it. I have no idea what's waiting for me. And yeah, fortunately, I was I made some good connections and was able to get in with a startup. It was in the technology industry, and that was actually my first official, like, marketing position. I was a community manager for this mobile app, designed for writers, actually. And, yeah, from that point, I mean, there were a lot of other creative marketing, communications, heavy on writing kinds of opportunities, um, but none of it felt like no matter what I did, it felt like it was not in conflict or opposition necessarily, it was just, like, out of left field. It was like, if you want clothing, shoes, accessories, and style, and personal expression, and creativity, and writing, the hell are you doing on a farm or a
Right.
wine at the wine bar? Like, it didn't make any sense, but today, as I sit here talking to you, I know every road, every detour, every barrier and roadblock, like, this is where I was supposed to be. Like, it led me here to
Mhm.
this point. Uh, but yeah, I had never I think I'm trying to think of like the biggest city that I had been to because in my mind, Seattle was huge. I was like, anonymity for the first time in my life. When you're
Right.
in a small southern town, everybody knows you and your business and your family's business. And like, you can't walk down the street without, having to do small talk. And I was so over that. So yeah, I was like, Seattle. And my brother at this point had been in the army for several years and had gotten out. But he was originally stationed at Fort Lewis, which is now JBLM. And while he was here, he's like, I know you've been thinking about this area. He's like, I'm telling you, this is your town. This is where, your spot. And he kept like, Maggie, you gotta get out here. You gotta get out here. And I was afraid. I was like really afraid of leaving my family behind, which as I say that now, I'm like, why? What did they
Right.
ever do for me? Like, and there wasn't a debt to be repaid there. Like, my job is to live my life to the best of my ability with what
Mhm.
they gave me. Like, but yeah, I was very afraid. I'm afraid of leaving people behind and the judgment and backlash that might come from that. Um,
Judgment
but
hold
I
back
mean,
from a lot of things.
yeah,
Even if it's
yeah,
perceived judgment, it holds us back from a lot of things that it hasn't even
yeah,
happened yet. But we're so afraid of it because we've experienced it for so long,
yeah.
it holds us back.
And it comes from like a people pleasing place too. Like I never wanted anyone, I didn't want to hurt their feelings.
Right.
I didn't ever want them to feel like some of the ways that they made me feel, like less than or not good enough or whatever. Um, yeah, it was like protecting their feelings, which now, of course, I know is enabling. And I was
Right.
just kind of repeating that toxic behavior. Um, but yeah, I will say something that makes me weird and has, I guess, been the case since I've been old enough to make my own decisions. Like when it comes to fear, I've heard a lot of people talk about like be careful with fear as a motivator for decision making. Um, Usually that's in the context of a conversation about scarcity, like you're maybe you're not taking action or you're holding yourself back because you're afraid of XYZ.
Yeah.
In my case, if I am afraid, I am going to first name the fear. I'm going to acknowledge it. This is what I'm scared of. And then I'm going to confront that asshole. I'm going to look it right in the face and I'm going to say, like, look, here's the deal. Right. And
Right.
I'm going to run towards it. I am afraid of leaving my family behind. I'm afraid of leaving the stability and security and health insurance that I have with this job that I could have until the day I die and be set,
Mhm.
like complacent and comfortable.
Right.
I'm afraid. I'm so afraid. And that's exactly why I did it. And since taking that risk, moving to the West Coast to Seattle, I've leaned even further into that. I'm like, I am scared of public speaking, which I knew in college and had a little bit of a similar approach. I'm like, I know I'm scared of this, so I'm going to take a class in it.
Right.
Outdoor adventures. Ugh, that sounds really scary. I'm going to do it. I'm scared of moving to Seattle, leaving my family behind, but I'm scared of public speaking. So, I mean, today I can't tell you how many speaking opportunities that I've participated in. Going live for the first time, sharing my first video, sharing a picture of me with food in the frame, like from, just like the weird messages I received about food and my body, the idea of being seen eating food was
Right.
like
I
one of my
understand.
biggest fears. And every time I do that and confront that fear, I won't say the fear is gone, but it's no longer a threat to me. I'm like, all right, cool. Let's move on to the next thing.
Yeah.
Um, and starting my business was also a big fear. Certainly was not ever part of my plan. I didn't think it was something that I could even have. Like, how could I? I'm not, I don't have an MBA. I didn't study business in school. Like, I don't have credentials and, do you know where I came from? Like, who would ever, that kind of imposter syndrome, like,
Right? So yeah,
but
you left marketing and you started your own business.
in
So
the
tell me.
middle of a pandemic,
Yeah.
March
Wait,
2020, yeah, it's another one of those, like, I've got a good opportunity here. It's paying the bills. I'm comfortable, secure. And I gave all of that up in an even riskier, tumultuous climate with the pandemic. In March 2020, I quit my job. In April of 2020,
Now, did you start
I'm
it before, like, March 17th is kind of the day that, like, everybody, like, left offices and stuff. March 17th is about that day. Did you quit your job before that, or
I think it was that week. I need to go back and double check that date when I sent my letter of resignation because I know that I wrote it like the first week of March. And
Mhm.
so I would have turned it in like pretty quickly after that, given my 2 weeks notice. But it was like, yeah, it was right as that was happening. And that was part of the catalyst. It was really like, it feels like such impending doom. Shit is hitting the fan. The world is ending. Like it
the whole
felt,
world?
you know, and if I only have one day left or a month left on this planet, what do I want to do? Like what do I really want to give to the world? And this was it. I call it my dream job, right?
Right,
Because it is. It's everything. It's writing, it's marketing, it's clothing, shoes, and accessories, but it's also psychology and sociology and storytelling and, you know, um, all the things that I did not have, all the things that were taken from me. It's like they were just like simmering and marinating and waiting,
right,
for 30 plus years. And yeah, April 1st, and that was intentional too.
right.
April 1st is my business anniversary, and I called it like a bit of a coming out party. I'm also a queer person, so I can use that phrase, but I'm like, this is it.
Right.
And I'm still kicking. I'm about to celebrate 3 years in just a couple months.
So what is the business?
It's called Maggie Green Style, uh, which is kind of a play on words. Like, it's not really just about style. It's kind of my vibe, right? My thing. Um, but it is an ethical micro business, is how I describe it, on a mission to transform how people see themselves. So you'll see, like in my branding, a lot of images, like glasses. It's a nod to the fact that I wear glasses, but it's a bigger metaphor than that. It's about clarity and visibility and feeling and being seen. But the simplest terms, I work in personal brand and style. So I want to help people not only discover who they are, but also how to share that, how to communicate it, not only with what you wear, but how you show up at work, in your interpersonal relationships, online, right? Um, and empowering people to, unlike what I experienced as a child, like not internalize the messages that are coming at you and the media that you see, really encouraging them to look inward for answers to some of those really hard questions. Like, I don't care about fashion trends.
Right.
I really don't. I don't care about the runway,
You don't
anything
care
like
about
that. It's like,
jam? Like, no.
or airwalk shoes, even to I mean, brands, like don't talk to
Right.
me about brands. I don't even want to talk about sizes or genders either. It's like clothing, it's more than clothes, right? It's a communication tool,
Mhm.
and I want everyone to feel like they have command over it for themselves, an opportunity to explore it in a really personal way. So that's kind of the style side of things. But personal brand is really like, again, figuring out who you are and what you stand for and what's important to you, like core values. But the other piece is, how do you tell people that in
Right.
a way that they're going to understand? And also in a way where if they meet you and maybe you're looking for opportunities in your career or whatever, how do they know what to do with you as opposed
Right.
to being like, this person is weird or like this person is too much, you know? How do you navigate around those assumptions that people make about you?
Right.
So
People do put you in a box based
yeah,
on how you look, which,
yeah,
I mean, I talked about this on here before, but I mean, I had lavender hair, very light lavender hair, was told I couldn't sell insurance because of it, which is the stupidest thing. Like, I don't sell insurance with my hair. That was back when I was selling insurance. And I mean, I like stupid things like that, that you get put in a box and it has no bearing on abilities or, um, you know, how successful you can be. And we have to get out of that mindset that
yes.
how somebody looks is reflective of how they can produce, how they can work, how they can contribute.
There's a kind of an ongoing movement. I don't know if you have seen this, especially on LinkedIn, but there's this wave of like redefining what it means to be professional. And, I have a lot of tattoos. Sometimes they're
Mhm.
visible, sometimes they're not. I've had
Right?
piercings and wild hair and like, unconventional kind of aesthetics in the past. And it was interesting. I never felt like punished or like any backlash for those choices necessarily in my professional work. Like, because I was always just such a perfectionist and an overachiever. And it was like, I'm going to show you that it doesn't matter what I look like. Here's all this other great value that I
Right.
can bring you. Um, but yeah, the redefining what it means to be professional and thinking about dress codes and just antiquated ways of, like you said, putting people in boxes. Like, can we
Mhm.
abandon the box? Like, it doesn't really have a place here anymore, you know? People are unique, and it's kind of my superpower is what's called individualization. Like, I can look across a sea of people and see patterns, but when I work with folks, it's like I hate to use the word snowflake, but for illustrative purposes, like you are one. There is no other you in this world. Like, no one can tell your story like you do. No one's had the exact experience and feelings that you have, but also like style preferences and soft skills and like all of those things. So I tell people like I want to help make them feel like they're the only person in the room, in the world, even if it's in a crowded space. Like, how do you stand out? Because there is something special and unique and weird about us all. And that's like my favorite thing to explore with people. Like, what really, what do you obsess over? So for me, it's shoes or,
Right.
like vintage jewelry or whatever. What's the thing, what's your weird? What's your brand of weird? Um, and it's really powerful work. It's really gratifying. Um, it can also be exhausting at times because I put my whole self into it, you
Right.
know? Um, but I wouldn't trade it for the world.
Right. I mean, I think that's fantastic. You in addition to doing it, as you've mentioned, public speaking, you've done some pretty interesting things throughout your life. You've made a mustache out of your own hair.
Yes.
You've sang. Oh, what did you sing? uh, pony
Pony?
in front of a whole group of executives. Um, so you really have put yourself out there in some really interesting ways. So why were you singing pony in front of executives? What prompted that?
Okay, so context first, right? We got to set the stage, set the scene. At the time, I was working with a small communications firm here in Seattle, and Microsoft was one of our clients. So we were
Okay.
subcontractors for Microsoft. So this was a Microsoft internal staff event for salespeople specifically. So there were sales executives, sales staff, and support teams. I think it was maybe 2,500 attendees at the event. And it was like a 3 or 4-day event, and on the 3rd night, I think it was, they had the attendee party, and then the entertainment was live band karaoke. They're actually called Rockaroke. I don't know if you've ever heard of them, but they do a whole circuit here in the greater Seattle area, and it's karaoke, but with a live band, basically, live
Awesome.
accompaniment. Yeah, karaoke is something that I discovered. I didn't mention singing. We talked about Cyndi Lauper and Tiffany, like, I've always
In your
loved to
dream.
sing in my dream, yeah. I've always loved to sing. I didn't really explore it in any kind of big way until I turned 18 and could, like, get into bars and things like that,
Right.
but karaoke to this day is one of my favorite pastimes. I find it to be, stress relief and emotional outlet. So I'm on site as support staff for this big event, which is a lot of pressure, and it's a big client, and I'm trying to impress my boss. And this was our one night for the whole event where we're like off the clock.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
can cut loose. And my boss was there and my coworkers were there, and they were all, like, here, have another beverage, have another beverage. Like, you
Sure.
deserve it. Just let loose, Maggie. Let's do it. So Pony was not my first song, and I'll tell you, it will never be my first song. It will always be the last song of the night because
You don't start
there's
with pony.
nothing.
Yeah.
You
No,
start
that's
with
how to
Pony,
start it.
but there's nothing more that I can give after that. It's like,
Right.
this is, tie it up neat with a bow, mic drop, whatever phrase.
Yeah.
Um, but it's one of my favorite songs to sing, mostly because it is such a surprise to the audience
Yeah.
when I walk up looking like the sassy librarian style that I have, and yeah, belt out
I'm genuine.
Ginuwine
Yeah.
pony. Yeah. Um, it's an absolute crowd pleaser, and I knew in that moment that it would be. By this point, everyone is 3 sheets to the wind. It's very
Sure.
close to the end of the night, and I was like, "If I don't do it now," you know, and my coworker just kept saying, like, "Do Pony, do it, do it, do it." And I'm like, "No, I don't know if tonight's the night." I did, Guns N' Roses, "Sweet Child of Mine,"
Sure.
that's a hard one and a
That
big
is
one,
not
also a
an easy
crowd
one yet.
pleaser. Um, but yeah, it was awesome, and people loved it, and of course they were surprised, but they were also just like, "I killed it," they loved it, and that
That
made
they
me
got
feel really
into
good.
it. Yeah.
Oh, dancing and singing along, and oh yeah, it was a whole thing.
That is incredible. That's awesome. Yeah, you've done a lot of kind of these unique little weird kind of things. You've got Halloween things that you've done, and you want to tell us about any of your Halloween stuff?
Yeah, so, again, keeping my past in mind, Halloween, even when we didn't have resources, was a really cool opportunity to get creative.
Hmm.
So I always loved Halloween, but it really turned into like a deep personal passion in high school. My Willy Wonka costume, my sophomore year, I think it was a really big deal. And from that point, it's been every year I try to like one up myself somehow. Like, how can I do more and bigger and different and more creative?
Right.
Like, just this past year, a dream that I didn't even realize I had came true. I was referred to as the Halloween queen in a professional context and am now revered and respected and appreciated and admired for my love of Halloween. I offer Halloween costume consultations every year. At least I have since I started my business. And the idea behind it is drawing from my past experience and scarcity,
Right.
but really like leaning into it more as a creative challenge. So I am trying to discourage people from buying plastic, disposable, single-use things, and instead, like, I'm gonna spend 30 minutes with you. You're gonna show me your closet. You're gonna tell me a little bit about, like pop culture things that inspire you, or like, just give me some kind of a little bit of inspiration.
Right.
And by the end of this conversation, I'm going to give you as many ideas as come to my mind based on what's in your wardrobe and, the feedback that you're giving me for things that you're interested in. And it's awesome. I mean, people love it. And the cool thing is like it doesn't cost anything. Like you
Right.
haven't wasted resources. You maximized, like made something special out of nearly nothing.
Mhm.
And of course, on the sustainability side of things, it really resonates with people. But for me, it's always about the creativity.
Right.
I'm like challenge accepted. So you have nothing. How can we make something out of nothing? Like you're thinking you don't have anything to work with at all. Let me tell you what resourceful looks like and what's actually possible if you just have an imagination?
Sure. Oh, that's awesome. I think that that is, you know, as somebody who is, first of all, trying to figure out my style at nearly 50, I've looked like a business professional for my whole life. Like we did I remember when we were 13 or in our class, we had to do some sort of say no to drugs uh, thing. And we ended up doing a video because one of the girls in my group had a video camera. I was seriously dressed like a business executive buying drugs. The guys, they were kind of, they were the ones that looked like they were on drugs. They were not the drug dealer and buyer. It was me, business professional, and my other kind of, you know, pop kind of gal that we were the ones in the transaction of drug taking and dealing. But I mean, I've looked like a business professional my whole life and, trying to find my style it's not easy. And being fluffier, even harder, just because there's just not as much out there. Like I love vintage stores, but so many vintage stores are, small sizes. Because apparently they didn't have fluffy people back in the, 70s and 60s and stuff. Yeah, so I think it's just a remarkable thing to help people. Clothing style, it can make you or break you in your the way you feel when you walk out the door. Am I happy with how I'm presenting today? And it'll sit with you all day long. You'll catch a glimpse of yourself in a full length mirror and it can ruin your day, but having a wardrobe that creates confidence, loving what you have, um, and it being your style, not just what you're supposed to wear. I mean, it can make everything for you. I mean, it's awesome that you're doing that.
It's interesting you mentioned like it can ruin your day. It can sit with you and nag at you all day. Something that I have kind of figured out by firsthand experience, but also observing people really closely throughout my life, there's so much like unpacking and unlearning that we have to do before we can even answer that question. And it's not simple. Like, what is my style? It sounds like this like superficial, two-dimensional thing. When it comes to how we show up in the world, our bodies and how we clothe ourselves, we're taking everything with us. Our entire lives accompany those choices and the rules that we make up and tell ourselves. So to hear that you're exploring this
Mhm.
with intention at 50 years old, I just think is awesome. And anyone who's listening, like, it doesn't matter what age you are, whatever the right time is the right time for you. And I'll just say, like, go deep, because the deeper you go, the more long lasting the impact and results are going to be. The fashion industry does a lot of work to make us feel like, it's not even that we're not good enough or less than. It's like literally to even exist and be respected or acknowledged in any way, you've got to have, you got to buy new clothes every season, and you got to have the latest whatever.
Right.
And I don't subscribe to any of that. Like, style is so personal, and that goes to that distinction between, like, I thought it was fashion that I was interested in. It's not. It's style. It's personal style,
Right.
you know?
Well, and, the more that I am in that mindset of exploring that, the more I realize I don't like all the cookie cutter stuff that's
Yeah.
out there. That doesn't resonate with me. That doesn't feel like me. So I am looking for more unique pieces. I don't want to walk through the streets and see me coming at me. Want to I want to I am a person who wants to stand out. I like that. That is
Yeah.
that's something I enjoy. I don't like to disappear in the crowd, and I don't like to look like everybody else. And, it's something that I think that people who don't even care about style, they still have those moments where they're tugging at their shirts, and because it's just something's not right, and you know, where they'll see themselves, or they just hate everything that's in their closet, even if they don't even care, they still feel that. So, it's remarkable that you were able to start that during the pandemic, and that you are using that in other creative ways like Halloween and stuff like that. I think that's so cool.
It should tell you, like, since this is Finding My Own Weird podcast,
Right?
like, Halloween, I get pretty damn weird with Halloween. It's February now, and I don't have my plans kind of formalized yet, but I'm sweating a little bit because I don't know how the hell I'm gonna, like, top myself from last year. I took a really personal approach and was thinking about personal style, and so I launched a series a couple years ago called Styleoween, where, I'm demonstrating exactly what I do in these costume consultations. Like, I'm using only what I have available to me in my closet to
Mhm.
create costumes. And last year, I was like, well, I'm going to make it more personal. Who are my personal style icons? And I identified like 12 of them, a mix of celebrities and fictional characters. And I was like, I'm going to create costumes for all of these personal icons using only what's in my wardrobe. And I think the final count of total outfits was 36.
Wow.
36 costumes. So I think I'm gonna focus less on volume and quality. Like, that was my absolute threshold. I can't do more than 36
Yeah.
for a Halloween season, of content production. But
Sure.
Yeah, I don't know what the hell I'm gonna do this year, but it was pretty weird.
No,
Pretty
I think,
weird.
that is one of those times that, I was in theater and everything like that. So anytime you can dress up, not be yourself or not be afraid to be yourself, that you're looking for a little outside of that box and everything. I think that it's exciting, it's invigorating, it's challenging, but in a good way. And
Yeah.
yeah, my 20-year-old, she doesn't do Halloween day. She does Halloween week, month. You know, she does it up right. And now that she has a daughter, now they're doing it up right.
Yeah.
And
I love it.
so yeah, we're big subscribers to that creativity and and those challenges. Well, I think
Fun.
yeah. Well, I mean, it really is. It is something to see you go from, very challenging background, but always having that inner. Well, I'm going to use the word diva because I think that it might apply. Um, my granddaughter, who is 17 months, everything goes on her head as some sort of headdress, shoes, but she doesn't want to wear the same shoe on each foot. It's different shoes,
Oh yeah.
always different shoes. So this one might be a boot. This one's going to be a ballet slipper. She
Why shoes?
she started to dress herself, whatever that looks like. And so I see when you're talking, I see her and her mother, who is a little style icon too. And, but to be able to hold on to that for really challenging times, and even when you thought your life was going to go into different directions, um, this this jump into where you are now, where you always were supposed to be, and all of those things that led up to that. It just goes to show that we're not prisoners of our circumstances.
Right.
We have to look past those things, and sometimes that's hard, and sometimes you have to do things like dig in the dirt or, things like that to get through those things. But when we can come out on the other side and we can see how our crooked paths lead us to where we can find joy and excitement and be energized, and it gives hope. And we do wish we could go back to our younger selves and say, hey, hold on, because it's gonna get good.
Right. Just you wait. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, this has been super awesome. I really appreciate you being here and talking to me today. And we're gonna have links to all of the things that you have going on, so people can get in touch with you, whether it's to help really find their everyday style, or maybe they are thinking about really hitting Halloween hard this year. And
not too early.
It's never too early. It's never too early.
Right.
But yeah, we'll have everything for people to get in touch with you and follow you. And God, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Christine. I love the show. I'm excited for future episodes and just feel really privileged to be included. So thank you for having me as a guest.
All right.
They say that necessity is the mother of invention. Sometimes it's a necessity of something handy like a dishwasher, a lawnmower, or a curling iron. And sometimes it's a necessity of the heart. To take a dream and a passion and to make it a reality. Either way, I hope that we keep exploring and creating. Thank you today to our guest, Maggie Greene. To find out more about what she's doing, follow the links below. We also want to thank our sponsor, Christine Lassiter from Two Rivers Mortgage. Her links are below as well. And continue to like, subscribe, and follow this podcast so you can see how I'm finding my own weird.